Good day, everyone. Hi, my name is Stephanie Kensler. I'm a planning manager with the City of Columbus Planning Division, and today I'm going to walk you through a presentation giving an update on Zone in Columbus Phase 2. We're going to start with the overall timeline for the Zone In project. As you can see, the initial code assessment was conducted in fall of 2021. We worked on Phase 1 during 2023 and 2024, and here we are in 2026, really in the thick of Phase 2, working on the draft code in hopes that it will be before council sometime this fall for consideration. Provide an overview of the project goals of Zone In. The goals remain the same regardless of which phase we're in, but we do have bolded here really kind of the priorities of Phase 2. So I want to specifically draw your attention to the second bullet point, the third bullet point, and the last bullet point, which say support growth that prioritizes environmental and economic sustainability through improved transit, additional housing opportunities, and the creation of job centers. Also, encourage thoughtful investment in neighborhoods that have experienced racial and economic segregation and help undo the harms caused by past urban development policies. And then lastly, continue to ensure that the Columbus zoning code is fair, understandable, and accessible. Before we dive into Phase 2, I just wanted to give a quick recap of Phase 1, which was called Equitable Access, and it really focused on our major corridors. It was about 12,300 parcels, or 4-ish% of the city, and was adopted in 2024. And you can see that Phase 1 zoning code map on the right. We had a lot of questions about how these maps were developed. And so I just wanted to share that the City of Columbus is a bit unique in that we have many neighborhood plans. There's over 40 of them. And each of them could include neighborhood specific recommendations and a land use map for that neighborhood. Interestingly enough, though, when we looked at them, all of them said consistently that mixed use and density should be focused on the corridors. So despite having over 40 different plans, we did have a policy consensus that mixed use and density should be focused on the corridors. So that's really what determined what was included in Phase 1, was where we had that consistent policy basis. So you can see again, here's what the ultimate output of Phase 1 was, focused on those corridors and the different zoning districts that were developed. For Phase 2, the priorities are a little different, but we are still wanting to leverage additional corridors to create more housing. Phase 1 certainly did not address all of the corridors, so we're going to circle back on that. We want to grow the local economy and support neighborhood investment by modernizing employment-focused sites and supporting small business. We want to connect housing, jobs, and transportation to make it easier for people to live near work, services, and transit, as well as continue to promote high-quality development by having a code that relies on clear and objective standards that's going to be easier to navigate than the code we have now. As I said, for Phase 1, we had a policy basis that said to focus on the corridors for mixed use and increased density. But once in all of those 40 plans, once you kind of move off of those primary corridors, everything gets a little cattywampus. You might have two plans that use the same words, like high intensity residential, but they may mean two completely different things. So there was just really no consistency once you moved off of the corridors. There was no consistent policy basis. So that's where the Columbus growth strategy comes in. We needed to kind of consolidate down to one policy basis so that we could move forward with updating our zoning code. So the Columbus Growth Strategy Initiative kicked off in June of 2025 and then was adopted by City Council in January of 2026. And that again provides that policy basis for Phase 2 and future phases of Zone In Phase 2, there are kind of three primary land use buckets that we're focusing on. So there's mixed use, industrial and warehouse, and then business and institutional campus. And you can see examples of each of those on the screen. And so now I'm going to walk you through a series of graphics and showing what the original map was for Phase 2, and then ultimately how we go from the Columbus Growth Strategy map to the zoning districts for Phase 2. So this is the initial map that was presented showing kind of the focus areas for phase two, and it shows those three different buckets. So in the yellow, you have business and institutional campuses. In the light blue is the industrial and warehouse areas, and then in the lighter green is mixed use. We also show on this map the dark green areas, which again are those phase one areas on the major corridors. And then also just noting that phase one, as I said, was around 4% of the city. This phase two is a much larger chunk and it's about 40% of the city. So for the growth strategy, we did a ton of public engagement, again, starting in July of 2025. We did online surveys, we had community workshops and pop-up events, we held stakeholder meetings with partners and institutions, we did over 100 presentations to various area commissions, there was an open house and an information station, there was a formal public comment period, and we also did a series of newsletters through GovDelivery and various social media posts. All of that community engagement led to ultimately about 20,000 changes from that initial proposal. And generally, we were hearing from folks that about a 65 to 75% support rate for the growth strategy. So again, what we started with was this map showing the yellow, the blue, and the green of kind of those big buckets. And then we did that first phase of engagement from July to October, and we made quite a few changes to the maps. From that engagement, we did about 8,400 changes. We had some parcels added, we had quite a few removed, and then a lot of it was just changing maybe where the buckets were. And so the next iteration of the map was released in October, and you can see where it just gets a little bit more specific. So on the left, where you can see in the green, it said mixed use. The next iteration of the map kind of divided that up into intensities of mixed use, for example. So you may have mixed use 1, 2, or 3. From October, we did a second round of community engagement and we made additional changes to the map. There were an additional around 11,000 changes. We had quite a few parcels added this time, a few were removed, and then again, we were changing intensities and classifications based on that community input. And then, as you can see on the right, based on that community input, you can see where perhaps something was originally proposed as a mixed use 2 or 3, and then based on discussions with the community in this specific area, the intensity of those mixed uses were brought down. And so ultimately, here's the Columbus Growth Strategy map. You can see the different mixed use categories and the legend on the bottom left, as well as the industrial warehouse and business and institutional campus. And then just to note, the areas in the lighter gray, those are areas in the city of Columbus, but they'll be included in future phases of Zone N. So those are like the more residential areas. And so that map that I just showed was the final growth strategy land use map. So the next thing is, how do we get from the growth strategy map that has these land use buckets to actual zoning code? And that's where this next phase of community engagement really comes into play. And I'll talk about the upcoming engagement opportunities in just a moment. But essentially, the difference between the growth strategy and the zoning districts is, if the growth strategy says mixed use or mixed use 1, what zoning code districts do we apply there? And that is what is kind of being drafted right now. And so those districts may be districts that were already approved as a part of phase 1 in 2024. So that's your urban general 1 or your urban general 2. Or like for industrial, there were not industrial districts as a part of phase 1. So there will be the creation of additional zoning districts as a part of phase 2. So as I said, the code and the map are currently being drafted with our consultants. They will be consistent with the goals of Zone In and the goals of the Columbus Growth Strategy. The hope is that they will be presented for public comment in the summer of 2026. And then the new code will be similar in format to phase 1, where we're going to a much easier to navigate, easier to digest and understand and use code document. An example you can see here. But the new code is going to include enhanced standards that our current code does not, such as building placement, form, things like encroachments, setbacks, as well as facade. And then again, you can see a snippet here of what that new code looks like for phase one, understanding that phase two will be similar. And you can also see the code and the map for phase one if you follow the hyperlink here. And then this link will actually just take you to, again, it'll take you to our website, but you'll be able to see the Columbus growth strategy map and be able to zoom in, zoom out, and see like specific parcel recommendations. We also wanted to include a couple of FAQs, questions that we're getting pretty frequently, just to help answer this question for folks. So the first question is, will area commissions still review variances and rezonings? And the answer is yes. Area commissions and major civics will continue to provide formal recommendations on variances and rezonings. So the intent, however, is that hopefully once we have a functional code that was built with community input and is, usable and accessible, hopefully we'll be seeing less variances because we'll be getting projects from the very beginning that align with the types of developments we want to see in our community. So there will be less of a need for variances and rezonings. Next question we get quite a bit is, what happens to existing area plans after the growth strategy goes into effect? So as I said, the growth strategy is in effect. It was adopted by council in January, and it supersedes any affected land use recommendation from previously adopted plans. So if there's an area of the growth that was included on that growth strategy map that was also included on a previous plan, the growth strategy supersedes that recommendation. If there's a case where the growth strategy does not address a site, that previous land use recommendation still applies. We have the Columbus Site Information Resource Map, or also called CSIR, that will be really useful in determining what the land use recommendation is on individual properties. So if you open that up, you can search by property and then turn on the land use recommendation layer, and you'll be able to see what that recommendation is and whether that was included in the growth strategy or if a previous plan still applies. And then any recommendations for non-land use matters from previously adopted plans, those remain in place. And you can find all of the previously adopted plans, whether including the growth strategy and whether the plans have been superseded. All of those documents are included on the planning document library that you can see here on our website. And lastly, I just wanted to share the engagement plan. This first section here is what we've been doing over the winter and into the spring. It's been very focused on area commission and major civic outreach. We've done quite a few area commission and major civic visits. We held a webinar at the end of March specific to that group. That was a similar presentation to this. We've been doing newsletters and then also doing small group meetings with the different members. As we move into summer, we'll have the 60-day public comment period. I'm not exactly sure when that's going to kick off. It's a little bit fluid based on the council calendar. But we will be advertising heavily once it's time. And during that time, there will be another public survey. We will host a gallery again, similar to what we did in phase one here downtown. There will be a webinar that will be open to the public to get an update on the code. There will be several public hearings. We'll do stakeholder interviews, and then there will be special events scheduled at the gallery as well. Once the public comment period concludes, there will be an additional public hearing prior to council consideration for adoption of the code. And with that, that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at zoningupdate@columbus.gov. Thank you so much.